I'm curious what you think about, because the right and the left, in the U.S. right now, well, in most Western countries, they don't really communicate anymore. They've just kind of, the left won't even speak with us anymore. They've cut off communication. They'll
Right?
just, it's down to like censoring us. So I'm curious what you think, what this is going to escalate to. Do you think it will eventually culminate in some kind of civil war, or yeah, I'm just curious how you think it's going to end here.
Well, you can look at it a couple different ways. I think the most useful way to look at it is to simply look at it from the perspective of military history. The main cause of war throughout time has been the migration of peoples. So if you look at all the, whether you're looking at like when the Ostrogoths came across the Danube, invaded the Eastern Roman Empire, and then 36 years later sacked Rome. Why did they invade? Well, they were invading because the Huns had had driven them west and south. And by the same token, why were the Huns there? Well, they got pushed out by whoever it was, the Mongols, or there's this constant pattern. It's typically been from east to west and then from north to south of people migrating and conquering. And so what we're now seeing, and in fact, getting back to Umberto Eco, he actually pointed this out in his 1990 essay called Migrazione. He talked about how for the first time in a long time, that the movement of peoples was now south to north. And he was basically saying it's not going to be anything that can be stopped. It's just going to happen. So we should all deal with it and get used to Afro-European man, blah blah blah. Now, of course, he was a leftist and a romantic, so I don't put any credence in that aspect of it. But as an observer, he was first rate. And so, if you apply that historical pattern to the United States, then the first thing you think is, okay, 80 to 85 million invaders. You can call them immigrants if you want, you can call them whatever you want, but there's still 85 million people moving in. When in history has that ever not led to war?
Right.
This is the biggest movement of people in human history. This is the biggest invasion in human history. It is vastly larger than Hitler or Napoleon invading Russia. Which was one of the, it is at least 2 orders of magnitude than the famous Sea People's migration into Egypt. And so it's vastly bigger than the Israeli invasion of Canaan. And so it would be historically unique for a movement of peoples of that magnitude to not lead to very large-scale war.
Mm-hmm. Well, what
So
would
that,
happen? Oh, I was going to say, what would happen to the left in that scenario? Because they're the ones that are really welcoming these people. Most people on the right are opposed to it. So in this scenario, the left are allied with them to an extent. So what would happen to the left?
well, the left is going to be destroyed by their own putative allies, and the survivors of that are going to suddenly develop a healthy new respect for right-wing perspectives. We're already seeing that. Look at how many white Democrats have moved into the Republican Party already. Mm-hmm. We're seeing the first signs of that. We're also seeing the other thing that can be expected, which is those immigrant groups, the newer immigrant groups, pushing out the previous immigrants and the white natives from positions of power in the Democratic Party. So, for example, look at who was running for the head of the DNC. They had a Hispanic against a black Muslim. Mm-hmm. Whereas the Democratic Party used to be, white Protestants, then you had the invasion of the Catholics with the Italians and the Irish, and then you had the invasion of the Jews, and so you had a lot of white and Southern European Catholics and Jews that were dominating the Democratic Party. They're now being pushed out. In Minnesota, for example, where I lived, where I grew up, there was a long-term Jewish state representative, and she got hammered. I mean, long-time incumbent, and she got obliterated in the primary by a Somalian woman who's got, I think, 2 husbands or something. I mean, this is like this sort of individual who would never, ever be able to get elected if they were white. But because they were Somali, and because, Somalis only vote for Somalis, she was able to defeat this, I think it was 17-term incumbent. And so what we're seeing is the newer immigrants, the Somalis, pushing the whites and pushing the Jews out of the way. That the black Muslim I mentioned, Keith Ellison, he's actually a congressman from Minnesota. Same thing. And so it's not going. But what people don't understand is that it's not going to be a North versus South. It's not going to be 2 parties because there are not 2 identities. There are many identities. For example, you guys are both younger, so you're probably not quite as you might not think of South Central LA as being like the heart of black rap. When in the 90s with NWA and all that sort of thing, everything was always Compton and South Central and that sort of thing. Well, a lot of people don't realize that the Hispanics have just about ethnically cleansed Compton. It's like 75% Hispanic now. And in another 10 years, 15 years, it'll probably be 100% Hispanic or pretty close. Mm-hmm. And so what does this have to do with, white people or Jewish people? Or it has nothing to do with it. That is purely not even Hispanic. It's a Mexican, African-American thing. Mm-hmm. And so you're going to see all these multivarious rivalries scrabbling for power, because that's what identity politics really is different groups each scrabbling and fighting for whatever grasps of whatever bits of power they can get in order to better their group. Mm-hmm. And white and whites will
go ahead.
I was just going to say whites will begin to participate mm-hmm. in that, because if they want to have any power, that's how they have to play.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
The Somalis. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, especially if you have the opportunity, like if you're a small minority, you're really not going to make a grab for power. But if as there becomes more and more of you, and you become maybe equal or a larger group than the other, race in the area, then you'll make the grab. And that's why when we see so much immigration, they're starting to get bolder and bolder and say things like, oh, whites, you're going to be a minority in 30 years. Look out, this is our country now, those kind of things. You see them blatantly speaking this way, and it should concern people, I think.
It should concern them a lot. I mean, what a lot of people don't realize, for example, I'm a mix myself. I'm part Native American, part European. I've got both American revolutionaries and Mexican revolutionaries in my family line. Probably why I'm such a I'm so inclined to cause trouble, But the thing is that what cracks me up is that people will say to me, "Oh, you're not an Indian. You don't really look that much like an Indian, whatever, that sort of thing." Well, what they don't understand is that if things progress the way that they're going, people are going to tell their great-grandchildren, these very people, they will be telling their great-grandchildren that they're not white. They're going to be because that's the way it works. I'm sure that.
What do you mean? Why would they say that?
Because as the white population, as portions of the white population begin to intermingle with the invaders and that sort of thing, then as they mix, then people begin to choose whatever the identity is. And not only do they choose it for themselves, but they often try to choose it for others. Mm-hmm. So like, for example, you'll see the left all the time trying to claim that, I'm not an American Indian, because it doesn't suit.
Right. It's not convenient.
Well, yeah, they want to call me a white supremacist. It's a little bit difficult when I say, hey, we got a tribe, we got a casino, all the works. So it's the same thing is going to happen if the trend were to continue in a linear fashion the way that it's gone the last 50 years. Now, I don't believe that's going to happen, because I think that the economy, first the economy falls apart, and then that's when people start really struggling for what safe enclaves. Because what it's all about ultimately is about safety. You guys being white are probably going to feel a lot safer if you're in a time of extreme social stress. You're going to feel safer if you're around people who look like you, who speak like you, who share your cultures and your traditions and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. It's normal. I mean, this is the way it always works. And so, and that's why I keep trying to tell people it's not about, it's not personal. It's not about the fact that, it's not about whether you like an individual Japanese person or an individual black person. It has nothing to do with that whatsoever. It has to do with these huge waves of societal tension, and those waves sweep everything along with it. And what you believe, what I believe, is totally irrelevant. It's just a question of what happens and our ability to accurately perceive what is happening at the time and to anticipate what is going to happen next.